Okay, so that's beginner's hour. We went 10 minutes over. I'm going to take that as a sign that we had a very energetic beginner's question thing. So, what's next? Welcoming remarks. Welcome. Welcome to CFAS. I'm glad to see you all here. How many of you, is it your first time here? Yeah, all right. Anybody want to tell me about themselves? I'm going to embarrass you. Where are you from, since you're sitting up front?
I live here in Orlando.
Okay.
I went to the Clock Tower Astronomy.
Oh, okay.
That you guys promoted.
Okay.
A couple weeks ago.
Great.
It was really cool.
Yeah, Derek was out there giving talks, and we had several members.
Yeah.
All right.
We
Cool.
handed out some brochures.
Yes, very good. Very good. Anybody else want to introduce yourself? You don't have to. Yes?
I'm John Frank. I was here 2 months ago for just one meeting.
Okay.
But, I live down near Waterford Lakes.
Okay.
I came here 3 years ago from DC.
Cool. Well, welcome to CFAS. I hope you come to some of our events and learn more about telescopes. And a few years from now, you'll be running the place. Any new members? No. Yeah.
I did just told me today.
Well, very good. Well, then you count twice. How about in the very back, new member?
Sure, my name is Vic Sanning. I'm here in Orlando. I've been for all my life. Big fan of astronomy and all things related. I live over the Windermere side of town, next to that big gleaming morning temple that pretty much lights up the rest of the night.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's a lot of fun.
So lots of lights. You know, you can still look at the moon and the planets.
That's about it.
Yeah, those are stand up real well to bright lights. There was somebody else. Yes.
I'm Mark Stearns. I live out in the Winter Garden area.
Okay.
Been interested in astronomy, space all my life, and hope to learn all I can about astrophotography.
Well, we have a very active astrophotography corps here at CFAS. We also have a lot of visual observers, but we have lots of all kinds of people who do all kinds of things. So very good. Okay. You don't have to have a telescope. You can start with binoculars. Start with naked eye. Or a loner. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so if you haven't been here in a while, we've sort of changed up our program. So all our little mini programs and announcements and stuff, we've moved to the end of or after the main program. This works great for our invited speakers, especially, so they can skedaddle afterwards. Our invited speaker for today, though, is Derek Demeter, who's going to give us you are ready, right?
I'm ready.
Yes. Okay. You looked like you were surprised. I was like, oh crap.
No.
Did we forget to tell Derek?
I might have.
Anything for Derek? No.
So Derek is going to do,
Really?
it's a planetarium show that he's running this month. And do you need this microphone, Derek?
I don't know, but I need to make sure all the doors are closed so we can get nice and dark in the planetarium
Let's
here.
close some doors.
Yeah, get it nice and dark. So, all right,
I'm
everybody.
going to sit here and turn the volume off.
All right, everybody. Can everyone hear me? All right. So, love is in the air this time of year. Hopefully, some of you are going to celebrate Valentine's Day with your significant other. Some of you probably don't care. And it's okay, too. But tonight, we're going to do a little bit of storytelling in the planetarium. One of the things I love doing in my job here at the planetarium is connecting our traditions and culture to astronomy, because there's a lot of that in our cultures. And actually, we're going to take a look at some of the other cultures around the world and how they were influenced by the stars. Most of our earliest traditions and cultures stem from observing the night sky. So we're going to do a little bit of an abbreviated version of our Heavenly Love Stories in the Night Sky program. Now, if you're really interested in seeing the full thing, first off, it's free for CFAS members to attend any of our planetarium shows on the weekend. So if you're interested, you can come on out on a Friday or Saturday night at 8:30. Now, this Friday night, we're going to be doing, it's Valentine's Day this Friday, and we're going to be doing two shows at 7 p.m. and 8:30. We're actually going to dress the planetarium with rose petals. we're going to have this beautiful pinkish color to the planetarium.
Ooh.
And you also get to see me dressed in a tuxedo for once in your life. So I know that might interest some of you. No, not really. It might scare you away, actually. But it's a great opportunity for you to bring your loved one to the planetarium and to enjoy and connecting them to astronomy. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and turn the lights down, and we'll go ahead and get started with our program of Heavenly Love. Now, as we start the program, we're going to start with some light pollution in our sky, being that here we're in Central Florida. Of course, usually when we do this show for the public, we talk a lot about light pollution and how it affects our skies. But of course, you all are interested in this stuff, so I don't need to spend too much time going on with this. But for those that are new here today, essentially a lot of our lights around cities pretty much prevent and wash out most of the stars in the sky. We have a lot of light pollution that prevents us from seeing most of the stars in the sky. But we can do something that's really cool in the planetarium that you can't necessarily do in the real sky, and that is in real sky in Central Florida, is we can turn off all the lights. We can get rid of all that light pollution so we can see the stars in the sky. So what we're going to do here is let's do what we normally do with our public shows and school shows. We're going to count from 3, 2, 1, and when I get to 1, I want everybody to say lights out. And when that happens, the lights will go down, and we'll be able to see the stars as they were seen for thousands of years when people began telling these stories. So, here we go. Ready? 3, 2, 1.
Lights out!
All right, that's not too bad. Not too bad. The lights are going to come down now, and we'll be able to see the beautiful night sky above us. And of course, now we can see the Milky Way above us here. And for those that are watching this on YouTube, I'm sorry, but you can still hear my voice. So imagine a dark sky under the stars. And of course, now that we don't have any of that light pollution, we can see the Milky Way band stretching across the sky. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with our first constellation. And just to help us here, we're going to go ahead and put up some cardinal directions. Wouldn't this be really nice if we had this in the real sky? Big letters to help us figure out where to look. Yeah. And we're going to look over to the south, and we're going to look about halfway up in the sky up here. And we're going to, of course, notice this group of stars. And this is going to be the first of our tales tonight. This is Orion the Hunter here. So here we have Orion, and there he is holding a Disney turkey leg above his head. And then here we have, I don't recommend using a cat as a shield, but apparently that's what it is. And if we take away Orion's picture here, we can see the pattern of stars that make up Orion. We have the 3 bright stars of Orion's belt, Alnitak, Alnilam, and Mintaka. Try saying those 5 times fast. We also have this really nice star up here called Betelgeuse. Now, Betelgeuse is becoming very, very, very strange lately, right? It's a variable star normally, but it's gone down quite a bit in brightness. And we're not 100% sure why, but there could be some speculation that it might have gone supernova, or there might be some irregularity in its pulsation. Maybe the star is starting to fall apart either way. So we don't know for sure, but let's say, for example, Betelgeuse did go off 600 years ago, because that's essentially the distance of Betelgeuse to us. If it happened 600 years ago, maybe we're finally seeing that light unfold. And when it does actually, that light from that supernova event finally makes its way to Earth, this star will get brighter, about the same brightness as the full moon at night. And it'll stay like that for about 3 to 4 months until eventually the star's brightness will continue to dim until it's no longer visible. And then eventually we might see a supernova remnant in its absence there. Here we have the head of Orion. We have the star Bellatrix right there. Down here we have Rigel and Saiph. And of course down below Orion's belt is this group of stars right here. We call that the area where we find the Orion Nebula and the Running Man Nebula, M42 and M43. So if you ever get a chance to look through a telescope, especially if you're a beginner, this is one of the best first dark sky objects. And even in a light polluted sky like Orlando and Central Florida, you should be able to see that fairly well. All right, so just to kind of go over where the constellation is, we're going to look to the south, look up here, and we'll see the 3 stars of Orion's belt. And then we have Betelgeuse just above it with Bellatrix, Rigel, and Saiph, the 4 stars that kind of surround the belt. And of course, here's Orion's head, his shield over here, and his club above him there. Now, when it comes to the stories of Orion, Orion actually has a fairly lengthy story. Some of the parts of Orion's story are not very good. When I mean by good, I mean things that go very bad for Orion for a while. But essentially, Orion is a Greek tragedy, if you will. And eventually, there was a period of time where Orion lost his eyesight and was able to regain his eyesight by meeting the goddess Dawn, and was able to essentially rejuvenate his eyes. And eventually, he travels to the island of Crete, where he meets Artemis. And Artemis is the goddess of the hunt, and she also represents, in many ways, the goddess of the moon. Well, Orion and Artemis are essentially at equals with each other. They're the greatest hunters that ever lived. And there's several different stories. And the one story I want to talk about tonight is the story of Apollo, Artemis, and Orion. Now, Apollo was the twin brother of Artemis. At the time, the moon and the sun were at the same brightness in the sky. They would be companions. They would travel amongst the stars, or travel amongst the day. Well, eventually, Artemis started to separate from her brother more and more, spend time with Orion. And I'm sure how many of you remember when you were young, or some of you that are young know that you meet somebody and eventually you start hanging out with them a lot more than your other friends or your significant other, and all of a sudden they get very jealous, right? Well, this is exactly what's happening with Artemis and Apollo. Apollo is getting really, really, really jealous of Artemis. We're spending so much time with Orion, this demigod. Orion's said to be the half man, half god, and he is the son of Poseidon. And long story short, Apollo gets jealous and tries to figure out a way to get rid of Orion. Well, long story short, Apollo approaches Gaia, who's the mother goddess, essentially the mother of the earth. And Apollo tells Gaia, hey, this Orion guy and Artemis, they're both destroying all of those sacred animals that you've created. And we need to get rid of Orion because I think he's a bad influence on my sister. And Gaia agrees eventually, and she creates this massive, large scorpion, Scorpius. And Scorpius is tasked to chase Orion out into the sea. And at this point, when this happens, when the scorpion is able to finally push Orion into the sea, Apollo encounters Artemis and dares Artemis to use her bow and arrow to strike at this object off in the far distance in the ocean. But of course, we know that object is what? Orion, yeah. So Artemis being a great huntress, she's able to strike down the object with ease. But of course, later discovers that Orion is missing. And she soon realizes what she's done. She discovers him beached on the shore, cries out to her father Zeus, and Zeus comes down, and Artemis begs her father to place Orion up into the sky as a prize of love towards Artemis. And it's said that Artemis occasionally will visit Orion in the sky, which explains to the ancient Greeks why there's no moon for a period of time. So the ancient Greeks, the lunar phases were caused by Artemis having different layers of depression towards Orion. And what's interesting is that this was an explanation of why the moon is never very close to the sun, at least from their sense, because of this thing where Artemis is no longer very happy to be around her brother Apollo. So that's kind of the explanation. So that's one of the many stories of Orion. But being that this is a love story, we went with that one. So now you kind of have a little bit of context of Orion and all that. Now, just over next to Orion, to the right, we have this group of stars right here. And we're going to take a look at that one. That is Taurus the bull. It's probably the only bull I ever know with very well manicured bangs. Look at those. That bull really knows how to style his hair. And if we take away our bull's picture here, we can see there is a group of stars that kind of make a V shape. Those are the Hyades. The Hyades star cluster with the bright star Aldebaran up there on the top left. That means eye of the bull. And then we have these stars just above it, which represent the horns of our bull here. And down here we have a few stars that kind of make up his front leg. And of course, off to the right of Taurus, we have here we have the Pleiades. For those that have a smartphone on, please go ahead and turn that off. That does produce a lot of light in the planetarium and can ruin our experience. Thank you. The Pleiades here are a beautiful star cluster. Another great object Richard was mentioning earlier about binoculars. And binoculars essentially are a great target for this object, the Pleiades, are a great target for binoculars. A great object, or a small, super wide telescope. So definitely check out the Pleiades. Now, this story I'm about to tell you is not a Greek legend. It actually has to do with the Pleiades. Now, to the Algonquin people of northern New England and Canada, they saw these stars as 7 star maidens, 7 sisters, too, which is kind of interesting. And they, in fact, actually saw all the stars in the sky not as constellations, but as people. They believed that the stars were essentially a mirror world to our world, the world of the spirits. And they believed that the sky represented sky people that lived up there. And of course, to find Taurus, what we're going to do is we're going to take Orion the Hunter here with 3 stars in Orion's belt. And we're going to go over here to the right. And we'll eventually find the V shape of stars right there that make up the Hyades. And of course, Aldebaran. We have the 2 stars for his horns here. And down below we have his leg right there. He looks like he's charging straight after Orion in the sky. And over to the right of Taurus, we have the group of stars, the Pleiades. So again, the Pleiades make up a very, very nice target in the sky, and definitely something you would want to see in the sky this time of year. All right, so the story actually what I'm going to talk about is Algon the Hunter. And this love story takes place, again, this is a Native American tale. And essentially, Algon had this really cool special ability where he could transform himself into any animal of his choice to use to hunt. And according to this legend, it said that Algon was one day hanging out around night in the grasslands, and he noticed, he heard laughing and giggling, and it looked like there was a big, large bonfire going on. He discovered seven maidens dancing and having a good time along this fire. And he noticed that there was this giant weaved basket near it, and it was essentially the sky basket that transported people from the ground to the stars. Well, he discovered that these were the 7 maidens of the Pleiades, or in that time, of course, they didn't know it was the Pleiades, but they thought they were he saw these were as the sacred star maidens of the sky chief. Well, eventually he came down, and he was all like starstruck, no pun intended. And he was really, really excited to meet him. He came down, he's like, "Hey, how's it going? Hey, I'm Algon, I'm the chief of my people over here." And that startled the star maidens. They ran off as fast as they could. But unfortunately, one of the star maidens tripped and fell and hurt her leg, and she was left behind. The star maidens went up into the sky and left her behind. Well, Algon, being a healer as well, took her back to his village. And eventually they started getting to know each other, and over time they fell in love. Yeah, they fell in love. And eventually they got married, and eventually they had a child. Well, years passed by, and the star maiden becomes extremely homesick of being away from her family up in the stars. So one night she gets up and grabs her son and very, 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 very silently walks away out of the house and eventually heads down and summons one of these sky baskets. Well, during this time, Algon, turns over and notices and feels that his wife is missing in the bed, and eventually gets up and he runs out to go and to see where she went, and eventually discovers her and the son heading up into space, or heading up into the stars. Now, at this point, imagine Algon the Hunter is very confused. He becomes very, like, what happened? What did I do? What went on? And he went, of course, and went into a pretty lengthy depression. And, well, things weren't going very well for Algon for a while. And at this time, the star maiden and her son were ecstatic to be with these star people. Especially, the star maiden was happy to see her father, the sky chief. But again, like before, she becomes she's not homesick anymore because she's back at home. She's now lovesick. She's now missing her husband. And so she eventually approaches the sky chief and says, "Father, is there any way that we can bring a mortal man to the world of the sky?" And he says, "Well, we have the ability to bring one mortal up here, and we can use this sacred eagle feather." Well, long story short, she heads back down and eventually meets up with Algon. And Algon is confused and angry and upset. And why did you leave? Why couldn't you tell me? And she says, look, I just wanted to be back with my people. I miss them, and I don't really belong here. But I have something I can give you that can give you a chance to be with me. And Algon realizes that he's the chief of his people, and he says, I can't abandon my people, but we can make a compromise. I can come up and spend half the time with you and half the time with my people. So he accepts the feather, and eventually he's able to turn into this great golden eagle, which eventually travels up into the sky. And so according to the Algonquin people, they see that anytime they see a golden eagle, that represents the spirit of Algon. And when they see the beautiful Pleiades up in the sky, that's a symbol of these star maidens. And the question is that how did this story originate? Well, there are some archaeoastronomers or anthropologists that believe that at a time during the start of this tale, because the Pleiades are actually moving in the sky, that there was a time when one of the stars in the Pleiades was actually occulting another star, or eclipsing the other star. So there was a time when the Pleiades only had 6 stars visible instead of 7. And they think that this tale coincided and inspired this tale of Algon the hunter and the lost star maiden. It was an explanation of this missing star in the sky. It was during her time here on Earth. All right, so we've taken a look at some constellations in the winter, but what we're going to do now is we're going to move this over to the summer skies to finish off our little presentation here. Now, if anyone gets motion sick, please close your eyes. Housekeeping doesn't clean up in here. I do, okay? So I don't want to have to worry about any space debris at the end of the program. So please do me a favor if you do feel sick. Just take a little breath, close your eyes, and I'll tell you when to open them up. But we're going to move on. We're going to continue. Now, of course, later in the evening, we're going to go over some of the constellations you can see this time of year. So we'll go more into length of that. But while this is going up, I want to go ahead and bring up the next constellation, and I'll stop the star projector when we get there. The next one we're going to talk about is Lyra, the lyre. But because it is Valentine's Day, and Cupid was kind of famous for carrying a harp, we went with the harp, right? Because, a harp and a lyre are very similar. They're basically these stringed instruments here. So we're going to go with Lyra, the harp, for tonight. And if we take away we look at Lyra here, it doesn't really look like a harp or a musical instrument, does it? No. In fact, this looks like a diamond earring. Yeah. There we go. That's another, romantic thing. You buy earrings for your loved one or whatever, right? So here we have the gem right there, and here we have the post for the, and that, of course, the post, that is that beautiful star, Vega. And Vega is actually one of 3 stars in what we call the summer triangle. And we're going to go ahead and take a look at the summer triangle here. Now we're looking at the summertime sky. We can see the summer Milky Way, including the constellation of Scorpius right here. Of course, Scorpius was involved in Orion. And fun fact is, the reason why the Scorpion chased after Orion is because in the sky, Zeus also placed in the sky the Scorpion, Scorpius, as a sign to always have Orion watch his back. And essentially, Scorpius is never up in the same time as Orion. So when Orion's up in the sky, Scorpius is not, and vice versa. So kind of an interesting way of connecting that story. Now, if we look above towards the zenith, and so for those that are not used to the term, zenith is the highest part of the sky. So we're going to look up to the very top of the sky, and we're going to see some 3 bright stars right here. These 3 bright stars are what we call the summer triangle. And the brightest of all 3, which is this one here, is Vega. So here we have Lyra. And there's the 4 stars that kind of make the strings, and we have the bright star Vega. Now, Vega is supposed to be the jewel that's connected to the top of the lyre. Now, the next story we're going to talk about is the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. This is a very famous Greek story. So essentially, Orpheus was considered to be the first rock star of ancient history. Apollo was also the god of music and gifted Orpheus this beautiful lyre. And Orpheus traveled amongst the lands and played his beautiful music. And people from all around the world watched his music, including some weird-looking people right there enjoying the beautiful music. Animals and people would come down and enjoy the lovely music. Well, eventually, one of his times playing music, gods and goddesses would also listen to his music. He eventually fell in love with a woman named Eurydice. They were inseparable. Eurydice would follow him, Orpheus would follow her, and his music was heavily inspired by her love and her passion for him, and vice versa. Well, one day, Eurydice is gathering berries in the woods, and she eventually encounters a satyr. And a satyr in Greek mythology is a half man, half goat, so think of Pan. And the satyr chases after Eurydice, and eventually Eurydice stumbles and falls into a pit of vipers. And nothing good ever happens when you fall into a pit of vipers. And unfortunately, she is bitten and she dies. And during this time, Orpheus, just like Artemis, is really, really concerned about his love. He wonders where she is, and eventually he discovers her tracks and follows them into the woods and discovers the body of Eurydice. Increasingly angry and upset, he throws the lyre down and walks away, realizing he's betrayed by the gods, and realizes that he will no longer play music. There's just no inspiration for him once more. And months pass by, and the Greek gods are very upset that Orpheus is no longer playing his music. They want some more music. They haven't seen a new album drop from Orpheus. They want some more music on their Spotify playlist. You know, they want music. And Apollo himself, the god of music again, travels to Orpheus and says, "What are you doing? Why aren't you playing music?" And Orpheus just gives him a really, really nasty look and says, "You know why. My wife is dead. You, the gods, allowed my wife to die. And I am rebelling against you. I will refuse to play music as long as my wife is dead." And Apollo says, "You know, I have a way to make your wife come back from the dead. And if you listen to me carefully, I can help you bring your wife back. And if you were able to get your wife back, would you play the music again?" And Orpheus is like, "Absolutely. If you are able to bring my wife back, I will do what you want. I will play and play and play and play, and I'll be the greatest musician ever." And Apollo agrees to tell him the location. He says, "You must travel to the edges of the world and eventually enter the world of the dead, Hades. And during your time there, you will greet the Lord himself of the underworld, Hades, and his wife Persephone. And you will play this song, and this song will encourage Hades to grant you one wish. And if you're able to succeed with that, you will be able to be back with your wife." So Orpheus agrees and realizes that this is a chance for him to be reunited with the love of his life. And so eventually he travels to the edge of the world. He goes down the stairs. Eventually he encounters the first trial of the underworld, Chiron. And Chiron is the river, the ferryman, the one that takes the souls of the dead across the river Styx. Of course, Orpheus, as a living thing, does not have 2 gold coins, 2 tokens, to give him access. But he plays a song, and Chiron is so moved by this song, he decides to give him free passage across the river. So maybe if you play guitar, play some music and get free, pass on a ferry ride or something. Hey, it worked for Orpheus, why not you, right? Now, eventually he now meets his second trial, the guard dog Cerberus, the 3-headed guard dog. He starts playing music again, and the guard dog is slowly wooed to sleep. Now, if you're a fan of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, you remember Fluffy, and Fluffy was put down by a musical harp, and this kind of alludes to that. He finally makes his way into Tartarus, which is the hell of Hades, and now travels down to meet with Hades himself, and he begins to play the song that Apollo taught him. And Hades realizes that this is Apollo's song, and he realizes that this man is here for a reason. And Hades asks, "Why are you here, mortal man?" And he says, "I am here for my wife. Apollo has sent me, and I'm here for Eurydice. And I have been told that if I were to play this song, you would grant me a request or a wish." And he says, "Sure, fine. What's your wish?" "Well, I want my wife Eurydice." Well, he says, "Okay." Hades is like, "Fine, fair enough. I'll give your wife back, but under one condition. You are to trust me, knowing that your wife will be behind you the entire way back through the underworld. So your goal is to continue to walk forward all the way until the very end of the steps. And your job is to never look back. If you look back once, your wife will be mine forever. Evil maniacal laughs are always important. Orpheus realizes that this is a pretty easy task. Sure, I could just keep walking forward. But what happened is that as he begins to walk through the underworld, he begins to get more and more doubtful whether or not his wife is really behind him. Is Eurydice there? Is Hades playing a prank on me? Maybe I should look. No, I shouldn't. I have to follow his rules exactly. This is my chance to get Eurydice back. And he begins to start climbing up the stairs to the world above, climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing. And each step that he makes, he becomes ever so more doubtful whether or not his wife is there behind him. And as he gets to the final step, his just anxiety is flooding him. He just can't take it anymore. He has to look and looks back and sees his wife, and she goes, she fades into darkness. Of course, Orpheus realizes that he had that one chance, failed that one chance, and decided the only way to see his wife again is to take his own life. And since then, the lyre falls down. Apollo grabs the lyre and shoots it up into the sky as we see it today as Lyra. As an example that, if you want something really bad, you will go for it, but this is a cursed instrument that no mortal or no god will ever play again. Now, I'm not going to end the program on that, okay? That was pretty deep. That was pretty dark. We're going to go ahead and end the program on a really light story. A story that comes from ancient China. Now, the Chinese, kind of like the Algonquins, saw the stars as objects too, sort of. They saw mansions and other creatures, but they also saw stars as living beings as well. They viewed the stars as kind of a kingdom of heaven. And in the case of these stars, we have a Vega here, and we also have another constellation that we'll bring up, and this is Aquila the Eagle. And so here we have our eagle, and if we take a look, we can see that Aquila has this bright star Altair, which makes the eagle's eye. Altair literally means flying eagle in Arabic. So he's flying across the sky here. There's his beak, his wings, and his tail feathers. And if we take a look up here, we can see right up here, just across the Milky Way is Altair. There's the head, his beak. We have one wing here, another wing here, and his tail feathers. And, the Chinese saw that these two stars, Vega and Altair, were separated by the great Milky Way in the sky. And this led to the story of the Magpie Bridge. This is the legend of the Magpie Bridge with the star Vega representing Xinu, which is the princess of the stars, and Niu Lang, which is the cowherd that we see on the right there. And the star now represents Altair. And the story has it that the princess escapes the world of heaven and eventually encounters this farmer, Niu Lang, and eventually she befriends him, and eventually they fall in love and they get married and they have children. And she's really enjoying her mortal life. Except eventually, though, the Jade Emperor himself discovers that his daughter, or one of his daughters, is doing something that she shouldn't be doing. And she eventually is forced to go back up into the stars, into her kingdom. And not only that, since she's the Weaver Princess, she has to weave the great Milky Way into existence that divides our world with the world of heaven. And, this really, really angers her, and she demands from her father, please, Father, I want to see my husband. He's the love of my life. And, of course, the Jade Emperor agrees. He says, sure, I'll give you 1 day to be with your husband. That's pretty generous of him, right? Yeah, 1 day. Well, on the 7th day of the 7th month, magpies from all around the world will create a great bridge that will allow these two lovers to be reunited for 1 day. So this story has actually inspired a holiday similar to Valentine's Day in China and other parts of Southeast Asia. The holiday of Qixi in China is it's not Valentine's Day, but it's like Valentine's. It's a day of celebration of love. And a lot of people get united during this time because of this connection between these two star lovers. And sometimes you get guys dressed up in old sage outfits, and everybody gets united and they fall in love and all that good stuff. And it just shows you how special the stars are to us. And we wanted to create this show to really help remind people that when we look up in the heavens above, we are reminded of all these thousands of years of history that people, when they look to the stars, they remember these traditions that came about it. And I hope that this Valentine's Day, you might be able to share your passion with the stars, with the ones you love. I know some of us here have couples already that share astronomy together, so maybe this Friday will be a day to celebrate that. But with that, I hope that you all enjoyed my abbreviated version of our Heavenly Love program, and thank you for spending some time and listening to it. So, thank you. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and very fast bring the light down. We're going to bring up a red light first. Gives our eyes a little bit of a break here. So we're going to slowly keep the red lights on for a few moments. But we're going to go ahead and bring the other lights up here. So let's go ahead and do that.
Thank you, Derek.
And I'll bring it back to Richard.
All right. You should have a PowerPoint in the folder for upcoming events.
Yes, let me just turn everything on here. Let me do all that, Jen.
Takes a few minutes to transition. I just have a few things to say about Betelgeuse. So I'll do that while you pull that up. So the latest on Betelgeuse, I'm sure there are people in here who know way more about Betelgeuse than I do, but I'm sure there's also a couple of people who are like, hey, so it hasn't exploded yet. It is actually still dimming. It has not gotten bright yet. And the latest I found in the the Unlost Masses literature for me was a prominent scientist at AAVSO was quoted, and he says it should bottom out around the 21st. So they're watching the curve, and it hasn't gotten brighter yet. Doesn't mean it's about to blow. It still may get slightly dimmer, but it's going to bottom out very soon, and then it should be getting brighter. If March gets here and it's not getting any brighter, we might have something exciting going on. But otherwise, it's like it's almost midnight. Is tomorrow going to happen? It probably is, and it's probably not going to blow up because it does go through these cycles normally. So, since I don't have this memorized, I'm going to look up here. Oh, who put this slide together? What a slacker. That would be me. They're not in date order. I apologize. So, this Friday, February 15th. Wait a minute. Is Friday the 15th? No, Saturday. Saturday, we have Lake Harney Astronomy Night at the Osceola Fish Camp Road in Geneva. So that is a Planetarium and CFAS event. On the 21st, we have Geneva Dark Skies. We've done this several times. Usually we'll do a public night and a CFAS only night. This is a CFAS only. So if you really don't like outreach and it just bugs you to have people asking you questions about UFOs and Bigfoot and things like that, that's fine. Come on out, set up your telescope. It's just going to be a bunch of amateur astronomers hanging out and doing some observing at the gun range. It's a fairly nice sky, big sky. It's not super dark, but it's it's a lot better than it is in the parking lot here by a long shot. On February 22nd. I really wish I could go to this at the Canaveral Shores. And every time it happens, I'm like out of town, and I'll be out of town again for this. But I understand this is a really great opportunity. The public does come there, but if I'm not mistaken, at a certain point, the public stops coming, and then you guys just hang out and do your own thing. And it's really dark because it's right on the ocean, so there's no city lights, to the east. So you've got a pretty good view.
There is a potential to have a lot of mosquitoes, so be sure to bring.
Okay, the weather has turned warmer lately by a bit. Also, this is interesting. Okay, so Trotwood actually, why isn't it on there? I have a Coffee and Cosmos event at the end of the month, and I must have slipped that off there. So the last Friday of the month at the Starbucks in Lake Mary, so it's Lake Mary and Sun, we'll have Coffee and Cosmos. So that's telescopes set up and the public comes. It's mostly an outreach event, but we have had some new members join because of that. So it's a great thing to do. And on March the 7th, the CFAS in Trotwood in Winter Springs. I've been meaning to get out to that event forever and could never get out there. I finally got out there about a month ago, and it's a really nice location. It's an outreach event. The public comes out and looks, but I'll tell you the truth, I would sit up there anyway. Really big sky. For me, it's important to have a big sky. And maybe I'm just spoiled because sitting up in the parking lot at Starbucks, there's only so much you can do. But you could, there's a big sky there. There's some lights from the park, but they're way over here. For a 20-minute drive from just about anybody in the area, it's a really nice site. It's very comfortable. There weren't many bugs. I don't know what the bugs are like when the weather warms up, but it's a popular city park. They probably treat it. So the bug situation was pretty good. The light situation was definitely not that bad, and it was a really nice site. If you don't want to bring a telescope, just show up and check it out. You might like it and might decide to bring a telescope the next time. All right, upcoming events. What else is on here?
Richard?
Yes.
I'll share my trick for dealing with mosquitoes. This is learned the hard way.
I'm always open for new tricks on dealing with mosquitoes.
It's important to, for me, it's important to wear long sleeve, heavy cotton. Spray the clothes with a severe bug spray, not off. Spray your exposed skin with the best off sort of thing you can get, but cover yourself with a heavy cotton, regardless of whether you think it's going to be too hot or not. But
heavy cotton, they have a hard time getting through the heavy cotton, I guess.
Exactly. That.
Good. Yeah. It's night, so there's not a lot of sun. So I mean, you could do it.
The heavy cotton sprayed with severe bug spray does a really good job of keeping it off.
Good. I like what Derek does. He looks like a beekeeper.
Yeah.
He's got a big net over his head. Down at where I go, sometimes during the summer, I wish I had his outfit.
Yeah, the suit I wear is good for people who have allergic. I have a mild allergy to a lot of permethrin or whatever it is, and DEET and stuff like that. But I literally got those kind of fishing shirts. I got mechanics gloves, and I have a bug jacket with a hood and a mosquito net and neoprene hunting boots with military grade tactical pants. And I never come home with any bug bites, okay? I look like a goofball, but people don't bother me when I'm out there. They see me in this, they think, oh my God, it's a skunk ape out there.
It's good defense.
It's good defense. It
I got
protects you.
lost on foot in a very bad area of San Francisco once where people usually get killed there. And I think I survived because I acted like I was insane. And they just thought, oh, he's nuts, we're going to leave him alone. So it is a great defense tactic. So AstroFest, how many of you went to AstroFest? We had a couple of brave souls who went. I understand we had at least one clear night. So the good news is, everybody who joined the Chiefland Astronomy Group, you are now members of the Chiefland Astronomy Group, and you can go anytime. And we will probably do something impromptu in the March or April time frame. Go up there, maybe not a whole organized star party, but just hey everybody, let's all go up to Chiefland, since we have a lot of you are also Chiefland members. And I remember saying, no, we're not going to do refunds. Somebody said something. Well, what I meant was, you can't refund your Chiefland membership. But if you paid cash money for a camping space and did not go, see Ken. Where's Ken? There's Ken. See him afterwards, and he will cheerfully refund your camping fee. And you could use that to get a burger on the way home tonight, or maybe the next time we go to Chiefland, use it for that.
Do we get our membership cards?
Yes, I have.
Yes, Ken also has the membership cards for Chiefland, and he'll give you those too tonight. So, very good. Thanks for reminding me. I forgot about that. So, good. Another thing for the members, we've been talking about how to communicate with the members electronically using the internets. And there is some concern about using Facebook as our primary vehicle. They're valid concerns. We're not going to get into whether, we're not going to debate that. But we do have members who don't want to use it. So as an option, we're not necessarily going to stop using Facebook, but as an option, the board's been investigating something called Groups.io, which is sort of like the old Yahoo groups or Google groups. And the board's been using it. We had to learn a few things about how to get picture attachments to work and how to get the calendar synchronized. And so we're going to roll that out. So you are going to get an email sometime this week from us that says, hey, here's your invitation to join Groups.io. Not only that, but our very own Frank Kane has put together a training video on YouTube. So you're going to get a link to a video. It's nothing scandalous. It will be safe to click on. And the YouTube video is going to be about how to use Groups.io. So at one point we were talking about just ditching Facebook and using Groups.io instead. I think what we're going to do is we're going to just we're going to offer it. We've got people who are willing to run Facebook. We've got people who are willing to run Groups.io. And the membership's going to vote with their feet. If a year from now, Facebook is a ghost town, well, that's great. We'll just continue Facebook. But if a year from now there's a hardy group on Groups.io and there's still a hardy group on Facebook, we're not going to make anybody switch to either one. And we'll make sure that events on the calendar stay synchronized between them so that everybody can know. Nice thing about Groups.io is you'll get a notice on your phone. I remember when the International Space Station flew in front of Saturn. You had to be in a parking lot at the Oviedo Mall, and there were a bunch of us who were coordinating on Facebook, but it was just a complete, hey, this is happening. What? Are you kidding? Hey, okay, and so we were coordinating. But there was really no way to alert all the members in a timely fashion, and so I think the Groups.io will be a better option for that. Because you can subscribe, you can say, I want all the emails. I only want emails if somebody mentions the word Saturn. So you can set your account up however you like that. But anyway, that will be coming out this week. All right, so I think we're to our mini programs. We'll start with, are you guys going to do it in a particular order, or can I just pick? I'm in the mood for Frank, because we were talking about weather. Frank's got a very interesting little mini program about the weather and what we're going to do about it, which is nothing. Very interesting. Oh, I'm going to give you the microphone. I better stay back here.
Is there a PowerPoint cookie thing?
Yeah, right here. I think it's the same one you use, I think.
Oh yeah, that was familiar.
It need to be turned on.
Battery doing this thing?
No, I think you might have turned it off, actually. There you go.
There we go. Cool.
You're not good with technology, are you, Frank?
Hey, it works. Cool.
There we go.
All right. Awesome. So, hey, I'm Frank. And you may have noticed that recently clear nights have been kind of few and far between. And you might be saying to yourself, I've been living here for a while. It wasn't always that way. What happened? What happened to the world? It used to be clear during the winter. And, well, maybe that's true, maybe it isn't. Sometimes when you think the world is getting worse, you're just looking at the past through rose-colored glasses. And, well, I figured I'd turn to data to figure out, is conditions really getting more cloudy over time in Central Florida? And you would think you could just go to Google and type in cloudiness trends and get an answer in like 10 seconds as to whether or not things are actually getting cloudier or not. But it turns out it doesn't work that way. There's actually not a whole lot of research on cloudiness out there. There's a few reasons for that. One is that cloudiness is really localized in its phenomenon. So the reason for it being cloudy in Central Florida could be very different from the reason of why it's cloudy in Spain, for example. But the other reason is that there just isn't a lot of data out there to be had on cloudiness. If you go out and download historical data sets for weather, you're going to get things like temperature and pressure and humidity and precipitation, because that's what these weather stations record. Typically, they don't have cloud sensors, so they don't tell you how cloudy it is. So if you're going to like the standard sources of meteorological data, you're not going to get cloudiness data. So figuring out the question, is it getting cloudier over time, turns out to be a lot harder than you think it would be. However, it turns out that there are people other than meteorologists and astronomers who care about clouds. and those are pilots. So it turns out that every commercial airport in America, and the world for that matter, is required to publish a very detailed weather report every hour that includes a lot of detailed information about clouds as well. And even better, that's stored in a central repository. You can go and download historical data on that very easily. So woohoo, I got my data source. So I whipped up some code in Python, and if you're a techie, you publish it in GitHub for you there if you want to play with it. And what it does is it goes out and downloads all the historical data for any given airport in the country, and it produces a nice pretty graph for you that shows you how clear the skies have been over time. So we can dig into any location in the country and say, how has cloudiness been changing across the years? What it does in particular is it will suck down all the weather observations for a given airport. It will then classify those as nighttime or daytime, and I throw out all the daytime stuff because I only care about the night. And we aggregate that either on an annual level or a monthly level for seasonal trends, or even on a daily level that we can break it down by. And then it spits out a graph. And on this graph, what it's showing you is the percentage of weather observations that were clear skies. So when you see these graphs, remember that higher values represent clear nights. And without further ado, I will show you the graph for Sanford's airport. What happened in 2010, right? So things were going great, and then 2010 happened, and it all went to crap. Now when I saw this, I'm like, is that real? Did they just hire a new weather guy in 2010 who didn't know what he was doing? No, you're not imagining it. It really did get worse in 2010. It's been bad for about 10 years now. But to test that hypothesis of whether it was just like an anomaly in the data, I checked out the data for the big airport in Orlando, for Melbourne, and you see the same thing there. 2010, things got awful. Same thing in Key West, same thing in Jacksonville. So this is a real phenomenon, and it's affecting all of Florida, it seems. So at this point I said, well, crap, I have to move. So I checked some other places in the country, Flagstaff, Arizona, Santa Fe, New Mexico, Burbank, California, and Tucson, Arizona. And the 2010 thing isn't happening in any of these other places. So it seemed to just be a Florida thing at first glance. Pretty weird, right? Interesting conclusion, so looking at this data, the grass is not always greener. Flagstaff, for example, not really much more clear than it is here. So don't go moving out to the West Coast just because you think you're going to have less clouds. Tucson's better, but it's actually getting worse over time. There's something else going on there. So the obvious question is, why did this happen? What the heck happened in 2010? Well, my first thought was maybe it's La Nina or El Nino, because we know that La Nina causes more clouds in Florida because, moisture in the air, stuff happens. But it doesn't really explain what happened in 2010 because we've been through several cycles of El Nino and La Nina since then. So maybe that affected certain years since then, but I can't point to that as a simple explanation for why it's been cloudier since 2010 here. You can see that La Nina is actually getting stronger over time, but that's a very slow trend. And again, nothing really special about 2010 here. So then I said, well, maybe it's global warming. Well, maybe that could be contributing to it. But that didn't start in 2010 either. That's actually been skyrocketing since 1980. The only thing interesting about 2010 is that that marked the end of a period of a few years where global warming kind of slowed down for a while. And a lot of people were gloating around that time saying, look, it's all hoax. But it came back with a vengeance after 2010 and kind of made up for lost time. So it's almost like something was building up in the climate and that snapped in 2010. Maybe that's a clue as to what's going on. I don't know. And then I thought, well, maybe it just has to do with weird things happening with the jet stream. That would explain this pretty neatly, right? So what if the jet stream just started hitting 30 degrees latitude where we live? You would see that as sort of weather getting really bad all of a sudden and staying that way if the jet stream just suddenly started going further south. And this gets interesting. So normally, the jet stream looks like it does in figure A there on the left. It just stays up near, northern latitudes and minds its own business. It's held in place by this boundary between cold Arctic air and warmer southern tropical air. And usually it just stays up there. It has these little undulations. They're called planetary waves or Rossby waves. And they move around the planet at a pretty good clip. And in a normal year, it looks like figure A there. But what's been happening over time is that the jet stream's been going nuts. So as it gets more and more unstable, because that boundary between cold air and warm air is getting less well defined, we see the jet stream dipping down further and further to the south and making all these weird patterns and shapes. In a really bad year, it would look more like figure C there on the right. And what's even worse, those waves are moving more slowly across the planet as well. So not only are they coming down and hitting us more often, when they do hit us, they're moving more slowly, so they affect us for a longer period of time, which really stinks. And to add insult to injury, it messes up our seeing conditions too. So, how do we know if that's what's happening? Well, you would expect that if it was really the jet stream reaching lower latitudes, that other cities at the same latitude would have the same problem that we have. There aren't a whole lot of cities in America that have our latitude, but Houston and San Antonio are pretty close, so I pulled their data here. And you can see, I have to say it, Houston has a problem too. So, the same thing happened there, like this sudden, sorry. Things like got really bad and like stayed there. It's not quite as pronounced as it is here, and the timing isn't perfect, so it's more like 2011 where that happened in Texas, but we see the same effect there. So that's a little bit interesting. This is seeming like a good hypothesis right now. And if you go ahead and check the weather maps when it's really cloudy lately, you see something like this. So this is a snapshot from a couple of weeks ago when we had some really lousy weather in January, and sure enough, the jet stream was coming down here to say hello. And if you look back in like December when it was even worse, it was going all the way down into Mexico. So you can definitely explain some of the bad weather we've had recently by looking at the jet stream going nuts. Now it turns out I'm a member of the American Meteorological Society, and so I have access to some research on this stuff. So I went back and I pulled the report from 2010 to see what was special about 2010. Can we answer the question, why was 2010 a special year here? And sure enough, the main thing that was weird about 2010 was what they call a very strong negative Arctic oscillation. Arctic oscillation is how we measure how weird the jet stream is getting, how far south it's dipping. And in 2010, we saw the largest negative Arctic oscillation ever recorded to this day. So again, this is starting to feel pretty interesting. The problem is, though, 2010 was terrible. This is the actual graph of Arctic oscillation showing you just how messed up the jet stream is. And 2013 wasn't too good either, but it actually got better. So although I can point to that as an explanation for 2010 and 2013, I can't really use that as an explanation for why things were bad in 2015 or 2016 or 2017. So unfortunately, the answer as to why things got bad here in 2010 is it's complicated. There is no one neat answer I can give you as to why this happened. It's a bunch of different things. Some years are La Nina, some years are the jet stream going nuts, some years are just bad luck. But it happened, and that's reality. So on a happier note, let's change the subject. What else can we learn from this data? So I mentioned that I can also aggregate this on monthly levels, and we can look at seasonal trends as well. So one question we can ask ourselves is, what is really our observing season in Central Florida? Common wisdom holds that it's the winter, because nights are longer, the weather's nicer, there's less bugs, and the skies are clear in the winter, right? No, they're not. If you look back for the past 5 years, it's the opposite. And you can see that this is really unstable data too, it's kind of all over the place. But in general, the cloudiest weather is actually in the winter now, and the clearest nights, believe it or not, are in the summer. So if you really want clear skies for observing, my advice is to get up really early before the sun comes up in the summer, because it's probably going to be clear then. And also really interesting is that it's the complete opposite of how it was in the 80s. So if you look at the same period of time from 1980 to 1985, it was, first of all, a lot more predictable. There's definitely a clear pattern going on there, right? And it's the complete opposite. So back in the early 80s, the winter really was the clearest time of year, and the summer was the cloudiest time of year. It just completely flipped in 1992 for some reason, all at once, just as suddenly these things happened in 2010 for us here. So weird stuff going on. Now, if you want to find the sweet spot between pleasant conditions and not a lot of clouds, you're probably looking at early spring. So the good news is things are going to get better next month if the past few years are any guide. March and April are usually okay, and you still have decent amount of nights, not too hot. So hang in there, guys. It's going to get better. On the bright side, maybe a positive takeaway from all this. So first of all, it's not the apocalypse. The y-axis here does not go to 0. So we're not saying that the stars never shine in Central Florida anymore. We're just saying that we've gone from 65% clear nights to 55% clear nights. Clear nights still happen, so you just have to be opportunistic and take advantage of them when they do come up. So it's supposed to be clear tonight, so go home and pull out your telescope when you get back home. Also, we might, like I said, I don't have a clean explanation as to why it's happening. So there's still hope. It could get better. We could have a good year. And it seems to have bottomed out, right? It's not getting any worse, at least. So that's the good news.
I don't know.
Who knows? There's a lot of random variation, but keep your fingers crossed. It could come back. We'll see. Anyway, I think that's all I got. So if you have any questions or comments or rants, I'm all ears. Yeah.
So thank you. That's a very well thorough research project. I think it was amazing and it's really cool. So, obviously one of the reasons why we do a lot of astronomy in the public outreach sense in the winter is because the skies get darker, right? So now we need to use this data to convince the powers that be that we should make it darker in the summertime, or shift the hours where it gets darker earlier so we can do astronomy. You can say, well, it's clearer in the summer now, But no, no, it was really well done.
Thanks. Yeah, down with daylight savings time.
Down with daylight savings time.
All right, thank you.
I thought that was really very interesting. He had been posting those results on Facebook, and it's like, dude, you gotta talk about this at the next club meeting. It's really, really good. So actually, our next one is going to be Chuck Cole, who's going to talk about scientific activities and observing.
I'm gonna try to do it sitting here.
Okay, he's going to do it. You certainly can, and here's a microphone for you.
Well, a lot of people are interested in the science of astronomy, and we used to be a few people who were a lot more active at it. But you can observe with anything, naked eye, telescope, whatever. You don't have to have expensive equipment to do really good scientific work. Just doing the observing helps professionals because, for example, the Space Telescope people use the reports from the AAVSO to know what to look at. And they point the scope. The professionals use that data, what amateurs are observing, and they will point to big stuff and confirm things. The science of it includes the observing of brightness, color, variability, or measuring things, recording and timing. And the technology of it is also something to be concerned about. That's in the design, operation, application of telescopes, mounts, and cameras. And as I made a comment before, not all telescopes are created equal, and that no one telescope does the job. Okay, next. It's unfortunate that none of you were actually able to know Cy and Emil and all that were active members long ago, but they endowed CFAS. And they were each very active in AAVSO. Cy was the real powerhouse. Extensive, extraordinary history of his observing, but Emily took up observing sunspots and so forth too, so she became an active observer. Next. We hosted a spring convention of AAVSO, and people from all over came, and we have many contacts all over the world from that still. Next. Organizations we're going to participate with, AAVSO is going to be probably the most that you'll hear about. People will get involved in it, and the point is not hearing about people getting involved in it, it's the invitation, a warm invitation to get involved. And we will have access to information, training, and that sort of stuff. But AAVSO has the most and richest variety of activities. You should know that nearly all the stars in the sky are variable. And there are probably, I don't know, I can't remember the count, but it's probably maybe 100 different types of variation that moves. Some things very, very quickly. Some things take forever, hundreds of years of cyclic activity. But there are many varieties. Some of it is sporadic, spontaneous, novae, things explode, and things like that. So there's a huge variety of stuff that can be observed. We'll talk more about that in coming time. IOTA is an interesting thing. We used to have a lot of people involved in that, and it was a grand adventure when it was predicted that there would be an occultation of a star by the moon. A team of people would go out to the spot on where the shadow is expected to appear and line up north-south and time this. It was very important to precisely determine the position of the moon and things like that, because you stop and think about the thing that the light from the star projects the image of the moon 1-to-1, life-size, on the Earth, so that as you have a north-south line and see the light blinking in and out, you're actually measuring the physical distance between peaks of mountains and things like that. So it used to be a really fascinating sport, except that it's become automated a great deal. Now people are looking mainly at the asteroid occultations and so forth, but there's a good bit of that. Alpo, that's not the dog food. Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. Richard is very interested in the lunar observations and photos. I keep looking for footprints on the moon, but I haven't found any. Anyway, the planetary phenomena and so forth. Amateur Telescope, the Antique Telescope Society is one that maybe I'm the only one involved in that, but that's a fascinating group. These people have an amazing knowledge of history, science, and technology, and going as far back as telescopes go. They typically only talk about telescopes that are at least, I think, 50 years old or something like this, but interesting group. And you can participate in that just by signing up at their online groups, I/O, and discussion, and sort of just eavesdrop on it, so to speak. Remote telescopes are something we'll get into in the future. And we're already involved in the Astronomical League and so forth. So next slide. If you're interested in telescopes and telescope design, I urge you to get and browse the Mill Handbook 141. It's a huge thing. It dates some years back, but it's got all the nitty-gritty you might want to know about why one eyepiece is designed better than another and so forth. It shows the correction curves. Tremendous amount of data there. I can talk about that if somebody has to another time. And as I keep saying, no telescope can do all things. I question Richard's comment about Big Dobbs seeing a really wide field, but anyway, you need a wide field scope, a long focus scope, low F number, and so forth. And because the size and brightness of objects in the sky have huge ranges. Like, I'm always impressed by the fact that Andromeda is, the size of it is as big as 7 full moons. You don't realize that it's that big, but it's huge. And the average telescope can't fit that image in it. It's just way too big. But 7 by 50 binoculars do a pretty good job. And anyway, so naked eye, it's surprising that you can do a great deal with just the naked eye. So, next slide. Huh? Well, you're just too modest. You have to use the naked eye. Alpo, I guess I really ought to say, Richard, you talk about Alpo. Alpo is the one I know the least about, but I know a little.
Alpo is about solar system observing. So planets, moon, comets, meteors, meteorites, that sort of thing. And there are lots of activities that you can participate in and report on. And there are features on the moon that you can catch. There are features like low domes on the moon that you can catch at low grazing sun angles that do not show up in spacecraft photos. So there are still discoveries being made on the moon by amateurs and people on the ground with telescopes in their backyard. And you can participate in that. And one of these meetings we'll talk about it.
Okay, next slide.
Oop. Wrong button.
There were more.
There we go.
You're out of time.
Maybe so. If you look at the sun, be sure to use really great care in doing that. And you have to be careful of not only the visual, but also the infrared. So sometimes things that people think are sun filters are not really, that the infrared can penetrate some of those plastics like they're not there. But ASO looks at sunspots and prominences and all sorts of stuff. The solar imaging with narrowband filters and all that sort of stuff, that's a big part. Next slide, please. And a little more about Alpo. Then just generic comment about deep sky observing that there are nebulous galaxies and star clusters, and a lot of the reporting that might be done will be done through AVSO typically. Go ahead. and again, this is the one that probably deserves the most comment. As I've said, nearly all the stars are variable. I'm always amazed at Mark Baldwin's study. He's a long-term member of AVSO. He specialized in eclipsing binaries, but the fast period ones. And he was a dairy farmer in Indiana. He's in his 80s now, but he would do his dairy farm stuff starting at early morning, time to milk the cows and do the dairy farm stuff all day. Come in and do dinner with the family and be sociable until about 10 o'clock at night. At 10 o'clock, he would go out to his observatory out in the barn, and he would, from 10 o'clock until time to milk the cows again, would have a cycle. Every 10 minutes, he would observe, and every 10 minutes, he would take a nap. And he would do that through the night, every night, for many years. But he was observing variable stars that change about every 15 minutes and recording the data and so forth. But then there are others that take maybe a few hundred years and have a slow variable curve and so forth. They have different meanings in physics and stuff, what's going on. But, and some people observe novae, the extragalactic novae. We had a guest here, we helped a guy from Australia who was awarded for observing the most of these extragalactic novae. We helped him come from Australia on his way to Harvard to get an award for that. I've mentioned something about him before. But you don't have to have expensive equipment to do really good, fundamental, and important work. There are many variations of what kind of observing you can do and how to report it. But if you want to get into astrophotography and so forth, DSLRs are a good instrument. Cell phones are a great instrument. Films, specialized films, are useful for some purposes still. But astrophotography cameras, solar cameras, some people do spectrometry. I don't know if anybody is doing much about lasers, but there are some lasers in the sky. Radio, there's some radio astronomy one can do with even using hand gear and so forth, but extra low frequency below the broadcast band on up to microwave. Next slide, please. Spectroscopy, that's pretty hard for the amateur to do. It typically takes fairly specialized gear, but some does exist. Determining true color and so forth. And it's interesting that masers and lasers do exist out there, and so I'm fascinated by the fact that we normally talk about things in the sky having redshift, but that's based upon there being a black body source of radiation. It doesn't account for the fact that it may not be. It may in fact be a laser of one spectral line, and that destroys the whole idea of the distance luminosity wall. But there are some out there, and they have been observed and so forth. So some of the times we talk about redshift, it may be a fallacy. Next slide. Meteor showers are something people observe. Various applications we mentioned. Satellite passages. I'm not sure if you can see the astronaut smiling up, but maybe. Next slide. Some people observe lightning and auroras and so forth. There is an electronic gadget you can get for your camera that lightning goes off too quickly for your human reaction to hit the shutter properly. But there's some little gadget you can get that will detect the flash and get the picture for you. Go ahead. We really ought to have some mention of the scientific observing one can do, different kinds of observing one can do at outreach. We ought to have the flip chart video thing that we've talked about, how to have a flip chart there that would talk a little bit about okay. The top. A cell phone with just a $15 binocular can do a remarkable amount of stuff. I stumbled across one of these on Facebook for it came a monocular with a cell phone mount and so forth. And I found a lot of stuff reported that people were doing with them and so forth. Anyway, anyone can do this. There's a tremendous amount of training online, training info online, there are booklets and so forth. AVSO has an extensive amount of programs that I didn't know about. I talked with Barbara Harris about it recently. We'll be saying more about it later. couldn't come tonight, but we really ought to have a flip chart video display with about 4 charts at the outreach things. That's my favorite push. So that we'd have, a page just says this is a CFAS sponsored outreach that mentions some of the member activities, but gets off into scientific observing and perhaps even mentions coffee and cosmos perhaps. But we ought to have some guests. We have had in the past some really notable guest speakers. We might be able to do those by video conferencing instead of having to pay their per diem and travel and all that sort of thing. There are some, for example, one of the leading people in occultation timing, his wife is ill and he can't travel. He's over in Tampa, but he could do video conferencing quite well. Anyway, so go ahead, next slide. So if you have some interest in some of these activities, I've deliberately gone through it fairly quickly to not take up too much time. But if you have some interest, contact me. And we'll have to. Huh?
You still have Earthling? They don't exist of this book.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Look, they're still AOL.
I'll only mock you if you're an AOL of this. That's really good. Thank you, Chuck. Okay, so we have 2 more programs. Derek is going to wrap up our mini programs with our Astrophotos and then his tour of the winter sky. So you go out to Geneva, what can you see? Take it, Derek.
All right, so we had quite a busy month for astrophotography. Kind of, it's actually, according to Frank's observations, looks like we're actually getting into some clearer skies. And by the way, I would say we actually have had some clear skies. The problem is that they don't happen on Saturday or Friday, which is where most people get to observe. And unfortunately, many of us don't have the luxury to do that. But you can still go out and do some cool astrophotography if you get a chance to, and seize the opportunity to do that. Don't make any excuses. Go out there and take it. So we had many members actually submit me some photos, but because there are so many amazing photos out there, I did snag some from Facebook. From the Facebook group. So if you see your photo on there, it's because it's noteworthy and we want to show you how awesome your photos are. So if you do happen to see your photo, just raise your hand and let me know, hey, that's my photo, and make a little mention about it, all right? So the first photo, what I like to do with the Astrophotos showcase is I like to start from the Earth with nightscapes, things like that, and work our way out to extragalactic space, right? So the first one is one of my photos. Actually, the first 2 are my photos. The first one I did was over at Bach Tower. Let me go ahead and do you all mind if we get a little darker? All right, let's go ahead and get dark. You don't really need to see us, right? Okay, so there we go. So here's this is Bach Tower at night, so the Bach Tower actually is not terribly dark. But over towards Orion, it's not too bad. So after the Dark Sky Festival, I was one of the speakers for the event. So the lady said, hey, is there anything you would like? And I was like, well, to be honest with you, I would really like to get a photo of the Bach Tower with the night sky. And this is something I've been wanting to do for several years, because the last 3 or 4 years they've done it, it was cloudy. And I really was hoping to get a shot of the tower with the constellations. And particularly when I was out there, I noticed Orion was literally just above the tower. And if you've never gone to Bach Tower, it's really cool. And I hope that you all get an opportunity to go out there on one of the dark sky nights that they offer, just to be under this beautiful tower. And they play music and things like that under the dark sky. It's really, really cool. Now, the other photo I did want to go ahead and mention, so back as far as nightscapes, as you probably saw this photo the other day. This is the recent launch of the solar orbiter, the ESA solar orbiter, and I was one of the, I don't know how I won the lottery in this, but I had the opportunity to actually photograph this launch from the roof of the vehicle assembly building. So this is actually the vehicle assembly building roof right here. I had to pinch myself 100 times thinking this is probably a dream. I'm going to wake up and, I'm going to realize I'm actually this is all a dream, but it so far hasn't. And A beautiful, pretty much full moon that night. So it was incredible to see this rocket lift off from pad 41 and all the way. It looks like it was almost about to touch the moon, and then it started to move this way. So it was an incredible experience, and I was happy to be able to capture this photo of this rocket launch heading to the sun. So it's now on its 10-year mission to study the sun there. So now, speaking of the sun,
How long is exposure?
oh yes, the exposure for this is about 3 minutes. It was at f22 and ISO 100. Now, for the moon, what I did is I took several images of the sky, and I was able to do a mean stack to get the moon in focus. I like to, because this was all blown out, and I wanted to be able to show people that was the moon. So if you zoom in on that photo, you can actually see the moon there. Now, speaking of the sun, we have a photo here. This is from Leonard Ward. I don't think he's here tonight, is he?
No.
Okay, Leonard Ward is not here, but I thought this was a really cool shot. I believe this is through the Calcium telescope, I believe. And what's really neat is he had a little drawing, he had a little circle here representing the Earth there. So there you go. So really nice little view of the sun in terms of scale. I think it's a great way to show people just how big the sun really is. And, you know, we talk about the sun, why not the moon? And this is one I just had to jack off of Facebook. So, Robert, you're here today, right?
Yeah.
Okay, do you want to talk about this photo?
The only reason I put it on there is because it's a 30-year-old Vixen Polaris mount that I restored, and a 30-year-old ETX 125, and a little DSLR camera, just to show my neighbors how easy it really was to get something halfway decent.
It goes to show you that the moon, just like what Chuck was saying too, the moon is a great target to really start getting into astrophotography, into making observations, and even to do scientific research. So the moon is really great, and it seems like too, I don't know, maybe Frank, you might want to do this as a next weather data, but haven't you noticed that always the clearest nights are on the night of the full moon?
Yes.
You notice that? So maybe that could be another data point that you can investigate. And this gives you an example that maybe you should, you know, it seems like when the moon is up, there are the clearest nights. And so maybe this is an opportunity to take out your telescope, even for an hour, after supper or something like that. Take the telescope out and look at the moon and do some observations. It's incredible. You can spend a whole lifetime studying the moon and all the different interesting features that are on it. All right, so now we're going to head into outer space here. We're going to be moving to, I believe this is Luke's photo of the Pleiades, right, Luke?
Yeah.
Okay. You want to talk a little bit about this photo?
Yeah. I've used the Attic Infinity camera, which is for, I don't know, quick demonstrations. It was just 17 minutes of light. So I guess it's not hours, and you can see what's in it.
Yeah, and you got really great capture of the star's color and everything, so I think this was a great representation of the Pleiades there. All right, now Frank and I got an opportunity. I wanted to test out some of my equipment, so Frank and I went over to Geneva, one of the clear nights out of Geneva. So here's one of my shots of the double cluster of Perseus here. I really was excited to try a new auto guider, and worked out pretty well. And I said, yeah, this is a great shot. And this was taken over at the Geneva Dark Sky, or Geneva campus. So nice color in there. This was taken with a my Mac Newtonian and telescope and my Canon 6D camera that I have cooled. So it's been modified a little bit. But yeah, so nice wide field image with that scope. And speaking of Frank got some really good data with the Horsehead Nebula. So take it away, Frank.
Yeah, it's the Horsehead Nebula and the Flame Nebula. There are many pictures like it, including one on the wall over there. But this one is mine.
It belongs to you.
Yes.
I have mine too.
Yeah, I think we all do. But yeah, you know, it's 10 hours of data, so, you know, a lot went into it. There's kind of a blue glare around Allen Attack there that I'm not too crazy about, but it's still pretty, so I'm happy with it. Yeah.
You're saying that's not a UFO?
No.
Oh.
No, it's not good.
Is that not normal, or? I mean, is that not, would that region not be like blue from that star?
Yeah, that's just an anomaly. It's like glare within the camera. So, yeah, it's not real.
Yeah, it's an internal reflection usually.
What can you do about
I don't know.
Buy a more expensive lens.
Yeah, spend more money.
Sometimes the orientation can help too. I've noticed if you move the object a little bit, sometimes you can get that out of the field of view. So the orientation and direction sometimes can alleviate that. I had that problem with the Witch Head Nebula for a while, but I was able to kind of correct it by moving it around a little bit. Speaking of the horse head, we have another horse head. This is Luke's horse head, but you used to see. What's that?
It's awesome, Luke.
It's awesome, Luke. No. See, don't be that. You know.
Just 11 minutes of exposures, and as I said, infinity. It allows you to see the object without waiting hours. It's stacking up automatically the pictures.
I see you have this repeating green triangle going around. I was stacking a picture and I had a similar problem, and I was like, "What is that?" Like, that's
it's
so
not
weird.
enough of light.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like hot pixels or something on mine.
Yes, and this one which I made about 30 minutes, and it's much better.
And I think Luke, you also did this one too, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
This is 30 minutes.
And this is
not much of the processing.
And this is the Rosette Nebula there. So, and this is a very big, large object in Monoceros, the unicorn, Monoceros or Monoceros, tomato. And very, very odd. This is an object that definitely needs exposure to hydrogen alpha.
This is, it made it with the L enhanced, so it got to about 5 filter.
Right. And for those that are new to the world of astronomy, hydrogen alpha is just a certain wavelength of hydrogen that mostly is star forming area. So most cameras have filters in them that prevent this certain wavelength of light to actually pass into the camera. So most people, what they'll do is if they have DSLRs, they will get cameras modified to where they'll get a clear glass that allows this hydrogen alpha to pass through. CCD cameras and cooled astronomy cameras, they don't have that issue. So they're designed for astronomy, so they have full spectrum of full visible spectrum. All right, and I believe this one is from William Rabig?
Yeah, right here.
Okay, do you want to talk a little about this?
Well, I'm taking in October with a hyperstar 11-inch celestron, and I'm taking in my backyard. And that's about all I can say about it.
Yeah, that's a great photo. Yeah.
How long?
I don't remember. Honestly, I've taken so many pictures since then. I just don't recall. It's not too long ago. It's I think maybe 200 seconds.
So is this a single exposure or is this?
No,
Oh, okay.
It's about 20 exposures.
Okay. And I think this is Tom Chitty's Thor's helmet. He did a great job with this. And I don't remember the camera or the telescope he used. Does anybody remember? I think he did post this on Facebook. So no. But Thor's helmet is an interesting star. It's a Wolf-Rayet star, which is kind of like a very unstable star. Actually, the star is basically expanding out. And this is the byproduct of it. So it basically kind of looks like one of those Norse helmets you would see, like Thor's helmet there. And this is located just south of Canis Major, in between Canis Major and Puppis, actually. All right, now this wasn't actually sent to me, but I figured Mauricio did such a good job with this photo, we should share it. So, Mauricio, can you talk about this? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I thought this was a good photo. It needs to be shared.
Thank you. This is a picture. This is it's about 60 frames at about 15 seconds each, taken with my Canon Rebel with a 250 millimeter lens, mounted on top of my 5-inch Celestron reflector with a little motor just for the tracking. I can't actually take pictures through the telescope yet because my mount just isn't really capable enough to do like more than a couple of seconds without movement and all this stuff. So I've just been doing it with my camera and zoom lens. But through stacking, like it's just the results are actually surprisingly good. So this is my second attempt at doing Andromeda, and my first one was just like a zoom lens with a tripod, and I could only get like a two second exposure. But no, but this turned out a lot better than I thought it would.
And one thing I praise you on this is that a lot of people who photograph the Andromeda Galaxy overexpose the core. And you can see the detail in the core, which is something that one of the things that a lot of people do when they're beginning in astronomy, astrophotography, is they want to get a lot of detail on the outside, but then they overexpose the core. So usually what happens is you have to take multiple exposures and then blend them together to get that what we call dynamic range of the image. So I think you did a really good job of exposing the core as well. And I think this is I think this is the last photo. It's back to William.
Yeah, it's, I think that was taken with my APO, 102 millimeter, with a Starlight camera, the M26 one-shot camera.
And this is the Whirlpool Galaxy. So this is a large spiral galaxy near Ursa Major, actually in Canis Venatici. But really, really nice object to look at. This is kind of iconic. You see a lot of Hubble telescope pictures of this galaxy with this other satellite. This kind of essentially they're being gravitationally bounded to one another there. So beautiful, beautiful spiral there. And that's all that I got submitted and I saw, but that's actually a lot of photos considering the last couple of months we haven't had a whole lot. But, you know, again, don't feel bashful, don't feel like, hey, you know, these don't match up with anybody. Just send the photos. We love to see what you're doing. We love to see what kind of photos you're taking. And at the end of the day, anytime you're out observing or photographing the night sky is a better day, right? So, or a better night. So yeah, please make sure to send me your photos, even if they're just moon photos or satellite photos or whatever it is, we want to see them. So again, thank you to all of those that submitted the photos, and there we go. All right, so
There's no such thing as just a moon photo. I'm just going to put that out.
Exactly. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up with our program. If we can have the doors closed again, please, on the sides, so we can get as dark as possible, because we're going to go ahead and take a look at our winter skies this time of year. So let's go ahead and turn on the star projector. So yeah, we get nice and dark. This will be our last program of the night, and why not? We'll get you all ready to go for stargazing at night here. So first things first, we can already still see we have our cardinal directions in front of us here. And first thing you're going to notice after sunset is you're going to notice this incredibly bright star-like object in the sky. You all can help me out, right? What's the name of that object? Venus, right? Venus, again, probably. And what's really interesting is Venus has been its brightest in a very, very long time. Extremely bright, and very nice phase to look at it as well. And as far as astrophotography is concerned, if you ever get a monochromatic planetary camera, you can actually use a UV filter, and that actually allows you to get photos of Venus with its clouds. And the reason why Venus is so bright in our sky is because of the high reflectance of those clouds surrounding the surface of Venus. So definitely get a chance to see Venus while you can, and enjoy that. So that'll be obviously your first target. Now I have the sky set to maybe an hour after sunset, and unfortunately Venus this star projector is from 1987, so there are a few hiccups with it. But Venus would be kind of over in this part of the sky, so and I'm sure all of you have been able to observe Venus, so that will of course be, I think, your first target to look at as the sky is getting darker and while you're waiting for astronomical twilight. If you're in a dark location, what you're going to notice is this very bright pillar of light in the west. If you're, say, at Chiefland, or if you're at even Geneva sometimes, depending on how dark it or how low, if the humidity is low. But if you're at a dark location, you're going to notice over in the west is this very large pillar of light. Does anybody know what that is? That is the zodiacal light, yes. So basically this time of year, the orientation of the sun and the earth is in such a way that the light, the interplanetary dust in our solar system reflects off of the sun. And what you're seeing is you're seeing interplanetary dust reflecting off the sunlight. And it's the most prominent time of year to see the zodiacal light is around the equinoxes. And as you know, we're getting closer and closer to the spring equinox. So the zodiacal light is very, very bright on this side. Now, sometimes if you get lucky, you can see another zodiacal light on this side. This is called the Giggamshine, which is the eastern light. And sometimes if you get to a really dark location, you might get lucky and see that as well. So, you know, it really depends on how dark you are. But if you're at Chiefland, I see the zodiacal light all the time. In fact, the darkest part of Chiefland is the western sky because you're facing the Gulf of Mexico. So that's actually your optimal place to actually do your observing and astrophotography at Chiefland is the west because of the stable air coming off the Gulf of Mexico and the darkness, transparency of the sky. So now we kind of have a little bit, let's go ahead and talk about, well, we already talked about Orion, right? You know how to find Orion now, don't you? Some of our new ones here should be able to find Orion. So look over to the south. You'll see Orion up here. We don't need to spend too much time on Orion, but we'll talk about some other key objects that you can see in Orion this time of year. We did mention earlier, if you look at Orion's belt, just below that, we have Orion, the Orion Nebula. Again, one of the best targets to look at through a telescope. Even if you have a modest telescope, you can see the Orion Nebula very nicely, especially under a dark sky. You can see those beautiful tendrils of gas coming off of what we call the trapezium. And the trapezium is home to a very hot, dense core of stars, very, very hot stars. They're fluorescing the gas around the nebula. And if you have really good seeing conditions, you can see about 6 stars or so in the trapezium. We call those the A, B, C, D, E, and F stars of the trapezium. And the other day when we were out with the telescope, we had some really good seeing, and I was able to see the E and F star of the trapezium here in this location here at Seminole State. So you don't even need to have super dark skies to really see the Orion Nebula and the trapezium. Now, right here next to Alnitak, if you have a hydrogen beta filter, which is a type of specific filter, visually you can be able to look at what's called the Horsehead Nebula. You also need a lot of scope. If you have a giant scope, that's really good because you can collect more light. And the more light you can collect, the fainter objects appear in the scope. But if you're doing astrophotography, the Horsehead Nebula, as Frank and Luke have shown you, is a great target to do. So Orion Nebula and Horsehead Nebula are very great objects. Another area here, if you have a modified camera, this is Barnard's Loop, and throughout this whole area is called the Great Orion Cloud Complex. We have the Boogeyman Nebula over here. We have M78, which is a little tiny Hubble's Variable Nebula. Lots of different things, all in this part of Orion here that you can look at in this part of the sky. And if you want to get a tougher target, right here next to Rigel is a dark nebula called the Witch's Head Nebula. And the Witch Head Nebula is a great target to really aspire to if you want to get a little bit dimmer object that's a little bit harder to get. So there's a lot to focus on Orion. You could spend a whole year or a whole observing season just focusing on the objects of Orion in the sky. Now, if we take Orion's belt and we go over here to the left, we come to this star right here, is Sirius. Now, in the real sky, Sirius is the brightest star in the night sky. Not the sun, because obviously the sun's not up at night, but it is the brightest star in the sky. And you'd be surprised how many people that I talk to here at the Planetarium think that the North Star is the brightest star in the sky. That's because they hear that the North Star is special and they can get it all connected with that. But Sirius is the brightest star in the night sky, and this links up to Canis Major, the big dog. So here we have the head. Well, actually, the head technically is here, the Milky Way. This would be like his collar. There's his front leg. We have his body, his back leg right here, and here is his tail. So here we have our dog right here in the sky. And there's a lot of beautiful, there's M41 right here, which is this beautiful open star cluster. Again, as I mentioned, if you continue to go a little bit south of that, you can find Thor's helmet, which is a beautiful target to photograph. So there's a lot of also other smaller star clusters all throughout the Milky Way. If you were to look, as Richard said earlier, look through a pair of binoculars at the Milky Way, you'd be surprised how many really cool stars you can see. Now, just below Orion, we have this little constellation right here. If you can see it, does anybody know what this is? Lepus. This is Lepus the hare. There's the head of the bunny. Here's his back and his front leg. And this is a beautiful little object to see. There's tons of galaxies and other nebulas. But what's really cool is right near this area here is a star called Heinz Crimson Star. It's actually considered to be one of the reddest stars visually in the sky. So this is a neat little target to try to find in the sky. You don't need to have super dark skies to find it. You can probably try to find it in your backyard. It's called Arley Porus. It's technically the actual designation name, but it's also Heinz Crimson Star. And this is a great object to look at in the sky here. So again, we have Orion, we have Canis Major, we have Lepus the hare. And if we come over here, if you're under dark skies, you might be able to see the zigzag of stars right here. This is Eridanus the river. This is a very faint group of stars, but you can see here, swiggling around here in the sky is Eridanus. So maybe that might be a great object to try to look for in this part of the sky. Now, we mentioned earlier, if we take Orion's belt and we go over here to the right, we come to Taurus the bull. So there are the Hyades, and up here we have his horns. Over here on this star, Elnath, right here, which is the main star here in the horn of Taurus, is we have M1, the Crab Nebula. So, if that's another great object, of course we talk about Betelgeuse. Betelgeuse may potentially go supernova if it doesn't continue its course and eventually show up and maybe brighten up again. If it did go supernova, well, we might see something similar to the Crab Nebula. The Crab Nebula, actually, this area here got very bright in the early thousands, and several cultures around the world have made note of this astronomical event. So maybe we'll have a similar event to this as well with Betelgeuse. So, and of course, here we have the Pleiades, beautiful Pleiades in the sky. So again, we'll be able to look at the head of Taurus, look over to the right of it, you'll find the Pleiades. Now, just above Taurus the bull, you can see that this other star, the other horn of Taurus, actually connects to another constellation. This is actually, kind of looks like a pentagon. There's 5 stars here. This right here is Auriga the charioteer. So this bright star right up here is called Capella. Think of a cappella, right? This is Capella right here. So here we have the head. Here we have the bright star Capella. And all throughout this area, we have beautiful star clusters, M36, M37, M38, and various other NGC star clusters, all in this one part of the sky. So if you get a chance, look outside, find Auriga. All these objects are great, super easy objects to see, even with a modest telescope. So again, this area is a great spot for observing star clusters. Now, I forgot to mention earlier, if we take the belt of Orion, we go over here to the left, come to Sirius. We come up here to the top here, we have Procyon, which makes the star in Canis Minor. These 2 stars are basically Canis Minor. I call it the hot dog because imagine a bun underneath them right there. There we go. So it looks like a hot dog. But anyways, if we take Betelgeuse, Sirius, and Procyon, and you connect all 3, you get a triangle. Yeah. Now, Mauricio has a Nintendo shirt, so I'm going to call this the Triforce. All right, here. A couple of you are laughing, but it's the truth. And in between, this is called the Winter Triangle. This is an asterism. It's very famous. And inside this area here is one of the hardest, most difficult constellations to see. This is Monoceros Unicorn. And honestly, I only had one Girl Scout was able to try to point it out to me, and I could see it. So apparently you have to eat a lot of Girl Scout cookies to see Monoceros. I think that's the secret there. But all throughout here we have some, again, looking right through the Milky Way, there's all kinds of new star-forming regions. Again, there's the Rosette Nebula is located here. And just north of that is what we call the Cone Nebula, the Fox-Fur Nebula, and the Christmas Tree Cluster. And so this area here is another great area to look at in regards to various objects in the sky. Now, the last constellation I'm going to talk about tonight, because we're just going to focus on the most important constellations of the wintertime sky. If we take Orion here, he's all-American. He's red, white, and blue. There he is. He could also be French. But here we have the three bright stars here, Rigel, Omnium, and Betelgeuse. And we go to the north of that, we'll eventually see, here we have Castor and Pollux. These are the Gemini twins. So here we have, this is supposed to be his head. There are his stick figure arms. There's a leg right here, another leg here. I see another head. There's his arm. There's the other twin's arm, and there's his leg and his foot. Now, people ask me, how do you know the difference between Castor and Pollux? Well, does anyone remember the name of this star? Capella. What does Capella start with? C. Castor begins with the letter C. So if you look for the star in Gemini that's closer to Capella, that's Castor. What star is this? Procyon. What does that begin with? What is this? Pollux. PP. So CC and PP. So Pollux is closer to the P star. Castor is closer to the C star. So that's a way. People ask me, well, if you look to the left, you got Pollux. Look to the right. I'm like, no, that doesn't work for me. I'm sorry. I'm dyslexic. I don't know what right and left are. You know, I'm that weird. I was that kid that's like, close your left eye, and I close my right eye. It's just that doesn't work for me. But this is a great way of remembering it, and also helps you remember the star names as well. So that could be a great way. And Gemini has, there's a really nice cluster right here on the foot of Castor. It's M35, beautiful cluster of stars. And there's also in here is the Jellyfish Nebula, which is a very nice target to photograph as well. So as you can see, there's lots to look at in the wintertime sky, and I don't want to inundate you with thousands of constellations. We're actually going to try doing this month after month, I believe, right, Richard? Is that right? We're going to try to do this more often, so what we're hoping to do is throughout the year we'll go ahead and focus on different parts of the sky as we continue along on our journey around the sun. So again, this is your homework assignment. We're going to end the meeting with a homework assignment. Your homework assignment is you need to be able to identify everything and report back at the next meeting. Not really. I hope that you get a chance to go out in the next couple of weeks, find a dark spot, even just your backyard, see if you can find some of these objects and have a good time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and bring the lights back up, and I will go ahead and turn it over to Richard. Thank you, everybody.
All right. I think there aren't very many astronomy clubs that get to meet in a planetarium. I think we're very privileged to have this venue and to have a planetarium person, give us some shows that are part of it. So.
CFAS was jealous.
Oh, are they?
Yeah, we're told
That we meet in the planetarium? Oh yeah, we're the cool club. That's right. That's right. And is there a discount for CFAS members when they come to regular meetings?
You didn't listen closely, Richard.
But this is a leading question I'm bringing up.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. No, yeah, it's free, completely free to attend planetarium shows here at the planetarium. So that includes your entire family. If you have a family membership,
That's not for
CFAS,
everybody. You got to belong to us.
You got to belong to us. Yeah. So
You're one of us. It's one of the membership has its privileges. Yes. All right. So that concludes tonight's meeting. Thank you for coming out and hanging out with us for a while. Kent is going to hang around and give away money. Not to everybody, but only if you gave me or Kent money for AstroFest, Kent will give you some of that money back. Yes?
Is there any amateur telescope making activity in the club?
There used to be.
Okay.
You know what we're missing is some members who are interested in that.
I've got a bunch of equipment willing to give.
Really? Well then, we should stay in contact. We should talk about that. Who here would be interested in building telescopes? Okay. We used to have them. Do you grind the mirrors?
Pardon me?
Do you grind the mirrors?
No, I have some spiders, some secondary mounts.
Okay.
mirror
Okay.
mounts.
When I joined the club, there was a group grinding mirrors in Frank Spurl's garage, and I'm like.
I was in that group.
I'm in awe. I'm in awe. I'm not mocking it. It's just like, man, that's just a great way for me to. No, I don't think so.
I have a grinding spindle that ought to find a good home.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then this might be a burgeoning subgroup of the club then.
Subclub.
Yeah, subclub. Yes.
What about the astrophotography workshops?
What about astrophotography workshops? We don't have any planned right now, but if you want to. If,
Is your cell phone thing on?
if we do, if the weather's good for Coffee and Cosmos, last Friday of the month, we'll do an impromptu cell phone astrophotography class, which is really just, 10 minutes worth of tutorial, or 5 minutes worth of tutorial. It's actually quite easy. I have an adapter that holds your phone on the eyepiece. There are about 750 of them on the market. If you buy one and bring it, you can hook it up to the telescope and figure it out together even. And you can get great, I always do it first quarter moon, because first quarter moon is really interesting to look at. And you don't have to do long exposures or anything to get a good photo of the moon with a cell phone on an eyepiece. Okay? So, have a good week. We're past full moon, which means every night it's dark for a little bit longer. Yes? Yeah, and then we have generator to the generator. He has to, this is staff.